Maybe it's because the original cut was so terrible, but I'm actually excited about what the DC universe has to offer. And I never thought I would say that because before this movie came out, Aquaman was my favorite movie from the DC cinematic universe. And the only reason it was my favorite is because of how stupid and over the top it was, which I think is good for a standalone comic book film. It's fine to just be entertaining, but with movies like Justice League, I expect something a little bit more, you know, because these movies are trying to build up the universe and have the characters from their standalone films collaborate. Before I talk about my issues with the movie though, I will say that I did overall enjoy the Snyder Cut, and it is infinitely better than the Whedon Cut. I was scared this would be like the Batman vs Superman extended cut, where the only difference is that pointless scenes are now added to the movie. Or I should say even more pointless scenes were added to the movie. But for the Snyder Cut in Justice League, the additional scenes actually matter and for the most part are really well done. But first, I'm gonna talk about what they should have kept from the Whedon Cut, and that is character conflict amongst the heroes. Different ideals clashing with one another and, you know, ironically, the Whedon Cut did this better. Kind of. Let me explain. The only clash of ideals that we got in the Snyder Cut was Aquaman saying reviving Superman is a bad idea, and the other four heroes are fine with it. I feel like this conflict should have been given way more depth. Now, the Whedon Cut, on the other hand, has this conflict be part of the main plot, and I find it more intriguing when the superheroes argue whether reviving Superman is a good idea or not. The only issue, and it's a pretty big one, Wonder Woman is the one who believes it's a bad idea to revive Superman, while Batman is the one arguing that the League should revive Superman. These arguments should have been flipped. Batman of all people wouldn't want to revive Superman because he knows how dangerous he is, and Wonder Woman knows how powerful Steppenwolf is and will try anything to get rid of him. I feel like they could have added this ordeal considering all the useless other footage they put into this movie, especially with the Flash trying to save that one girl. No fucking idea why that was put in there. Even with that aside, I still have many other issues with the Snyder Cut. My main annoyance being Wonder Woman's theme playing every time she's on the fucking screen. Like one moment Cyborg could be talking about his dead parents, and then as Wonder Woman enters the scene, we hear blah, 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 just out of fucking nowhere. And it is so overdone. I had like a mental journey with the song. Like at first I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. Around the fourth time they played it, I was like, okay, now it's just funny how overused this music is. And then around the 12th or 13th time it's used, I'm just straight up fucking annoyed. It's obnoxious. And I saw people like complimenting it. They were praising the use of the theme, and yes, it is a cool theme, it's a good idea, but surprisingly, when you use it in every scene Wonder Woman is in, it kind of overstays its welcome. There are certain points when you play a character's theme, but doing it all the time is not the way to go about it, unless it's Ocean Man. The movie is also still plagued with very cheesy dialogue and Gal Gonorrhea's acting. The special effects are still pretty terrible too. The third act is fine, but the first two acts, it's pretty painful. Like there's some very eyesore CGI in here at some points. And I understand this was a necessity for Snyder in order to get the money to redo his movie, but holy shit, the product placement was some of the worst goddamn fuckery I've ever seen. Thankfully it dies off in the second act, but it was incredibly distracting nonetheless. Some nitpicks I have, like the way Cyborg's dad's death was executed. I mean, it's a great idea to put in the movie, it's a great thing for Cyborg's character, but the setup was pretty lackluster and mediocre. I mean, just step out of the glass box when you do the laser thing. And the Superman vs. Justice League scene is still pretty terrible. It looks like shit, the action's awful.
Yeah. Something is definitely bleeding.
I can't help but compare this movie to The Avengers, the first one. It's pretty much the same plot, and yeah, the first Avengers movie is better written than Justice League. The movie is a lot more solid. I mean, it has better dialogue, it has better effects, acting is fantastic, and the characters actually have some sort of conflict between each other. Okay, so this movie had a lot of problems for me, but overall, I do like it. I like the Snyder Cut, because unlike the Whedon Cut, there's things in this movie that I'm entertained by that's not just laughably bad. There's actually good stuff in this movie. For example, Cyborg went from the blandest League member to one of the most interesting ones, if not the most interesting. I would argue Cyborg has the most personality out of any of the characters in the League, which would make sense because the Snyder Cut focuses heavily on Cyborg's character, and they handle it very well. Cyborg was definitely one of the best parts of the movie for me. He was a great character. The other characters like Batman, Superman, and Aquaman were okay. And I guess Wonder Woman's a fine character too, but I hate Gal Gadot's acting. I don't know what it is, Like, I don't know who gave her the bright idea of opening your mouth in every single scene, just fucking close it. Gerard Butler does the same shit and it annoys me to no end. But again, Cyborg's character was given a huge upgrade. Probably the best character in the movie, honestly. Another character who got a massive upgrade was Steppenwolf, and I was very surprised by this one. Not only is his new design fantastic, but he actually has a character. He's not just this boring, bland CGI mess. He wants to impress Darkseid in order to return to him. There's an actual goal involved with this character. Is the Snyder version of Steppenwolf the new Griffith? No. I mean, it doesn't have to be. I feel like he played his role very well. And I like that the other Darkseid henchmen are with him too, setting up something that the MCU kind of failed on, which was the Black Order. I mean, they were the most boring, uninteresting characters that were, you know, attached to the main big bad villain. Except for Ebony Maw, all of them were fucking jokes. They sucked. But now there's real potential to build up Darkseid's henchmen. And we also have Lex Luthor and Deathstroke. Pretty excited about that. That's another thing too. I think the DC cinematic universe will beat the MCU in terms of antagonists. Yeah, Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor will never be fixed. Still a crap casting choice. Surprisingly, Jared Leto wasn't too terrible as the Joker, at least in this movie. I don't like him in Suicide Squad. I thought his acting was very hammy. Here he kind of held back. He was still a little hammy at some points, but it wasn't too much. I love his conversation with Batman at the end, even though he's still doing the really terrible Joker cackle. If you like it, that's fine. I personally find it pretty cringe, honestly. But again, one of the best scenes in the movie for me is a scene talking with Bruce. When Jared's not trying to be a cartoon character, he can actually be a pretty intimidating Joker. The Flash is another character who received a huge upgrade. I found him extremely annoying in the Whedon cut, but he gets a really cool scene in the third act, and speaking of the third act, what a fucking ride. I mean, they up the action, they up the tension, even the effects are better. If you want to know why I like this movie, it's because of the third act. The third act saved this movie from being god-awful. I'm sorry, but the first two acts were nothing special. I mean, there were a couple of good scenes here or there, and I'm glad they deleted a lot of terrible scenes from the Whedon cut. I mean, the entire intro for the first Justice League movie is completely taken out. So I guess that's a huge plus for the first act because those scenes were terrible. They also cut out a bunch of scenes where the movie tries to be really funny because the Whedon cut was trying to make this like a family-friendly film or some shit like that, even though the previous one was Batman vs Superman, which was trying to be super dark. Remember that pointless family that Flash rescued in the last act? Yeah, they're completely out of it. So the tone was completely off, but if you watch Batman v Superman right before Snyder's Justice League, it really fits. Overall, this movie isn't perfect, but it is very entertaining. I wouldn't consider it great, probably just good, but it is enough for me wanting more. And that's mostly due to the last hour of the movie, because it's super entertaining. I had such a good time watching the last hour of Justice League, because the scenes before it range from okay to terrible. But once it hit that final hour, for me at least, it was a really fun ride.